Well, grab another quarter. It's time to put it in the quarterback carousel again.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good morning, and thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show. Welcome in. I'm Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Connor Happer of 1620 The Zone is with me. And guess what? There is big news as of Monday night out of Nebraska football headquarters. Kenny Minchey, we hardly knew you. He is gone. He has screwed over Nebraska, you might say. He is not coming to Nebraska. The Notre Dame transfer flipped to Kentucky after 24 hours in the fold with the Huskers. And you say, Kentucky? Kentucky? That's a basketball school. Or is it? Is Nebraska a basketball school?
Mm-hmm.
We'll get to that later.
Yeah. Pretty wild. I found, the warning here was fired by Will Compton, none other than Will Compton, who, as you all probably have a pretty keen understanding at this point, he has a direct line to the coach.
Right.
The wording that he used,
like Matt Rule dropped a little rant on Will or something.
Yeah. The wording that he used was Kenny Minchey just bleeped Nebraska, a word that starts with an F. He committed, was supposed to visit tomorrow. Agent had paperwork, said he was signing. Kentucky hit him with a blank check. Lack of honor and spine led him to switch before signing the contract, and the agent complied. There you go. So that feels like it's that feels like it's Nebraska's point of view at this moment.
Yeah, I think Nebraska is not happy about what happened with Kenny Minchey. We'll talk about that in a minute. The reasons why Nebraska is not happy and what it can do, what it will do in this situation. But first, as promised, our portal headlines, as we will do every show now through the end of next week. Kenny Minchey is gone. Nebraska is without a quarterback commit in this portal class as of this moment here as we record this on Tuesday morning. Owen Chambliss, the linebacker who was a key piece of the San Diego State defense for Rob Orich, is in as a commitment to Nebraska on Monday. And so is Brendan Black, an offensive guard, 3-year starter at Iowa State. So Nebraska loses one commitment, its first commitment, a big one, the quarterback that stands above all else. And it gains 2 commitments. And then to the portal, Willis McGahee IV, who was a important piece as a freshman for Nebraska, a true freshman who showed great promise in 2024 and then fell off a bit in 2025. Did not have the kind of beginning to the season, did not have really the training camp that Nebraska was expecting from him, and he ended up playing in fewer than 5 games, so a red shirt taken by Willis McGahee IV, which then led him to go to the portal as of Monday. So let's start this thing with Minchey, and it happened fast because on Monday afternoon, Nebraska was in celebration mode, you might say, or it was certainly in like feel good mode that the quarterback was in the bag and he was ready to sign. He was committed. Like, portal recruiting is not like high school recruiting, or we didn't think it was, where you have these flips at the last minute. Like, generally when a player from the portal commits to a school, that player then signs with the school. But if you want to take Will Compton at his word that Kentucky came with a blank check, like, he may have increased his earnings by $1 million. And I'm sorry, but who can blame somebody for going where the money is? Like, Kenny Minchey didn't owe anything to Nebraska. He didn't have to come to Nebraska. Like, honor in this situation, like that's out the window. This is like these guys are just, they're free agents. They're renegades. And until they sign contracts, you can do whatever you want. It's going to make people feel bad, but Nebraska's been on the other side of that, whether it's in recruiting or in the portal. Kentucky has a new head coach. He is coaching Oregon's offense, coordinating Oregon's offense right now. Will Stein headed to Kentucky. He pulled something out here, pulling double duty this week as he works with two teams, and Kentucky, which lost its quarterback, a freshman from last season, to Arizona State via the portal, now is the benefactor as Nebraska feels the pain in the portal. So,
all right, yeah. So let's do this. Let's use, these are relatively vague terms, numbers, figures, stuff like that. But if Nebraska had Kenny Minchey around in the neighborhood of, let's just make it square, let's just say $1 million. They were going to pay him $1 million to be their quarterback.
Sure, we can
year.
say that.
First of all, already, a third of what Dylan Raiola was doing. So Nebraska feeling good about that, right? So let's say $1 million. And then Kentucky came in and said, let's, should we make it 2? Should we make it more than that, or something like that? First of all, how crazy is Kentucky to say that to a person who has never started, any college football games before? That's pretty crazy. And then this is the thing that I want to talk about. How crazy would it in turn be then for Nebraska to then, stay competitive in that for that one person who, once again, has not played before, has not started a college football game before, to compete there and say, hey, all right, well, we'll pay you $2.5 million. We'll pay you $3 million to be our quarterback. They would have to be double as crazy. It would
be crazy.
Yeah,
it would be crazy, and
it's crazy to do that.
It would be a sign that your portal spending was off the rails, that your actions as a program in that moment were spinning out of control. At the same time, Nebraska needs a quarterback. Nebraska has TJ Lateef.
There's a lot of people with the same resume as Kenny Minchey out there. A lot of them.
I think when you're dealing with this situation where you have a commitment from a quarterback and it's been one day, and that's essentially your entire tie to that player. It's not like Kenny Minchey has been at Nebraska for a year, and all of a sudden the situation changes and you lose him. You immediately just have to move on and say, all right, well, we're done with that. Like, there's no mourning the loss of Kenny Minchey here. Like, we knew you for 24 hours. So I'm sorry, but it's over. And Nebraska is now in a more desperate position. Like, we've heard from Matt Rule through the whole process of paying players and NIL and rev share that the desperate team sets the market. Well, Kentucky was a desperate team in this situation, because Cutter Boley, who threw for 2,160 yards and 15 touchdowns as a freshman for the Wildcats in 2025, went out the door when Mark Stoops was fired at Kentucky. And as I mentioned, he landed at Arizona State. So Kentucky was more desperate than Nebraska, apparently, in this spot, and was willing to pay Kenny Minchey, the quarterback who's never started a game in his 3 years at Notre Dame, more money than what Nebraska was willing to pay him. So where does Nebraska go from here? Because that's what matters in this situation. It's not crying over the loss of Minchey. Like, you get to get over that. Like, it's a new day. It's Tuesday, and Nebraska's moving forward. And maybe Nebraska gets a quarterback today on Tuesday. Like, if this thing starts to drag and you go into next week and you're still without a QB as you're putting together the portal class, and the closing of the portal is bearing down on you, like it's January 16th when this thing closes, then you become more and more desperate each day. But like, where's Nebraska at today with what it needs to do at this position?
I would say square one. I would say, considering how quickly the Minchey thing came together, and how it was, those two sides were obviously tied right off the bat when the portal opened. It felt like maybe that was the direction Nebraska had planned on heading for some time.
Yeah, it might have taken a couple weeks for that to come together.
and therefore was not was not experiencing other things on this great ride that we call the quarterback carousel. So back to square one, I think, where there are a lot of options. I don't think it's anything to panic over. It is a difficult loss in that sense, and you were kind of, at least thinking about the season and thinking about other players that you were going to add with him in the fold. And I think they think obviously he's a talented player, but they'll end up with some of the names that you've heard. DJ Lagway, which I would not be in support of. Aiden Childs, which would be fine, and Anthony Calandria from UNLV, who had some pretty good stats last year. I don't know much about him because I haven't seen him play much.
Those are early names that came out in a report on Husker Online on Monday night. I think there'll be some other names that pop in this search to replace. The search to replace Kenny Minchey or whatever, just like cut Kenny Minchey's name out of the whole thing. This search for Nebraska to find a quarterback in the 2026 portal, it might happen. It could happen very fast, or Nebraska needs to find somebody by the end of this week, and it needs to get done. And Nebraska now is likely going to have to pay more. The three quarterbacks that you just mentioned, they all have starting experience. Calandria was, if I'm not mistaken, the Mountain West Offensive Player of the Year this season at UNLV. So if you're going to go out and get a starter with experience under his belt, you're probably going to have to pay more than what Nebraska wanted to do for a quarterback in this spot. Maybe that changes what you have to do in going to get a third quarterback, because that's always been the plan, to have three quarterbacks on scholarship going into the moving forward after January 20th. So it's a curveball, no doubt.
I think you hit the key. They're going to probably have to pay a little bit more at this point. So we can discuss that a little bit further and where things go from here. We'll do that when we return on the Locked On Nebraska podcast. But first, a word from our friends at Rocket Money. Let's be real, managing your finances could be overwhelming between subscriptions you forgot about, bills that keep going up, and trying to figure out where all your money actually goes every month. It's easy to feel like you're losing control. And who has time to track every transaction or hunt down hidden fees? Doing this yourself, it's really, really difficult. That's where our friends at Rocket Money come in, the personal finance app that helps you take control. It finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. Rocket Money tracks all your subscriptions and lets you cancel them right in the Rocket Money app. With just a few taps, no more hunting down customer service numbers and things like that. You could set budget goals, get personalized insights, receive real-time alerts for large transactions, upcoming bills, and low balances. Consolidating your checking, savings, loans, whatever you might need Rocket Money to do to help sort of wrangle in your finances, they have you covered. Let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join rocketmoney.com/locked-on. rocketmoney.com/locked-on. One more time, rocketmoney.com/locked-on. All right, welcome back, and thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen, and for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. Like we said before the break, I think the money is, Nebraska had a good situation with Minchey because they weren't, they were kind of moneyballing it a little bit, and they felt like they had a good player and they could get them on the cheap and, sort of, mix around some of the money elsewhere. Now Nebraska is #1 desperate, as we talked about. The desperate, rule said the desperate team set the market. And #2, like the pool is either, the really popular guys that we just mentioned before, or unknown commodities who haven't played yet, that Nebraska hasn't had a chance to do much background on, and it would be a quick building relationship. Luckily they had, well, I guess it doesn't matter now, they had some time to get familiar with Minchey and thought he was going to be their guy, and now it's just a shorter timeline. So I think all that is going to factor into what happens next for Nebraska.
I wonder what the like real true to life reaction, like the look on his face was when TJ Lateef saw the news on Monday night or heard the news about Minchey, who was being brought in to compete with him and, in the eyes of many people, beat him out for the number one quarterback job in 2026. What he thought. Now TJ knows that they're going to go get somebody else, and maybe Nebraska should take a moment here to appreciate what it has in TJ Lateef, like someone who is seemingly staying loyal to the Nebraska program through a period of turmoil that he was a part of experiencing late in 2025. Does it say anything to you, Connor, that Matt Rule's program? And remember, Matt Rule is the coach who stood in front of us late in the season, middle of the season in 2025, and said, now we can go get whoever we want because the commitment is there financially to make Nebraska a player in the NIL and rev share game that's on par with the top teams or around the top teams in the Big Ten. So does it say anything to you that here with the first key acquisition in portal season 2026 that Nebraska got the rug pulled out from under it by Kentucky?
No, I saw a lot of people go back to that quote last night. And once again, as I said at the very top, if you want Nebraska to, if another team comes along in this situation and they want to drive the price up and they want to start a bidding war and all of those things, like Nebraska can be better off driving up the price and spending all their money on a quarterback with more experience and who has more bona fides than Kenny Minchey. This would be a unwise thing to bet on and have it go all the way up to the top of where you want to spend money on a quarterback. So I think you could look. It's odd to me that people. I guess maybe it's not odd because I don't know. I get the sense that people are souring on Rule and the things that he says in the first place. But I don't think that applies here. I really don't. Like, I don't need Nebraska to go get in a bidding war with Kentucky for a quarterback who's never played before. That's not what I want them to do. That would be an unwise investment into their program. So. I don't care that they lost. If Kentucky, a program that doesn't win very much, wants to come in and spend $2 million on a quarterback that's never played before, great. Let them. Let them. There's a lot of Kenny Mincheys out there. I'm not trying to spend $2.5 million on a quarterback that's never played before.
And if Nebraska does have to spend $2.5 million on a quarterback, it would make more sense to do it with somebody, as you said, who's got experience. Now, the thing is, with the quarterbacks that are remaining in the portal, you start to get to a place where the experience that they have isn't necessarily great experience. In the case of a Lagway or Aiden Childs, like, there's a reason that they're in the portal. And part of that reason is because it didn't work out at Florida or Michigan State in the way that they had hoped, in the way that their coaching staff had hoped, in the way that the fan bases of those programs had hoped. Both of those players didn't live up to high expectations, whether it was because they just failed to win games or got hurt or turned the ball over a lot. So Nebraska's going to get to a spot possibly here where it's dealing with a quarterback who is viewed by some as damaged goods. And what's funny is Nebraska's getting away from a quarterback who is viewed by some, fairly or not, in the national scope as damaged goods. One quarterback who's out there looking for a home, and as Nebraska's looking for a quarterback, is Dylan Raiola. Now, I'm not suggesting in any way, shape, or form that Nebraska and Dylan Raiola are going to come back together in this unusual marriage, but it's just odd that Nebraska's looking for a spot and Dylan's looking for a spot. And here we are as the portal drags on into day 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, just to get out in front of that, I feel very confident in saying there will be no remarriage of those two sides. That's my opinion.
It would be one of the strangest stories of this portal season on a national level if that were to happen. Where should we place Nebraska on the always changing DEFCON meter? Here on YouTube, we show the meter in the last place that we put, with help from our graphics master Nathan, where we all put Nebraska was at DEFCON 3 on the scale of 1 to 5, which is getting to the point of being very worried about things. Might the defection of Kenny Minchey push Nebraska closer to DEFCON 2, which is about the time that you need to send Matt Rule into the bunker to do his job?
Yeah, I think you can make an argument for DEFCON 2. I think you could push it up in that direction, considering, it's not just Minchey, although that's the very public one, and gives people an opportunity to look at Nebraska and say, what the hell is going on here? But I also think, Nebraska probably hasn't got as great of reception on the portal marketplace than as they may have over the last couple of years, or they may have hoped this year. So there's that. They also, I'll add this, they also still do not have a defensive line coach, which could factor into that DEFCON meter. So yeah, let's maybe bump it up to 2. This is pretty rough right now.
I'm gonna say today's Tuesday. I'm gonna say if we get to this is giving them some time. I'm gonna say if we get to Friday and we're still in this spot where Nebraska is looking for a QB, the D-line coach I'm giving them a little more leeway on, because I think at this point you have to assume it's coming from the NFL. And I think that Nebraska probably can tell its defensive linemen who are portal prospects that, hey, look, we got this guy over here. Don't worry about it. Like, we're hiring somebody. We have a big splash that we're going to make. And he's either on the NFL side, getting things sorted out after his team didn't make the playoffs, or maybe they're in the playoffs and we have to wait until that's over. Although you shouldn't really have to wait. It's not like you're hiring an NFL head coach. Like, an NFL D-line coach can like make that known, even if he's going to stay, and he would stay with his team through the playoffs. The NFL is not as stupid as college football, where coaches leave their teams when the season is still going on. But
yeah, that was like a one, a Lane Kiffin only seemingly situation. But yes,
you're right, because Oregon, both coordinators at Oregon are off to other jobs, and they're still coaching with Oregon this week as the Ducks get ready to play Indiana. But yeah, I'm gonna leave it at 3, and if we get to Friday and Nebraska doesn't have a quarterback, then we're going a hard 2, and you start getting Matt Rule ready to go underground.
All right, so there were some good things. Nebraska did get a portal commitment yesterday from Owen Chambliss, a first-team All Mountain West player at San Diego State last year. And Nebraska ball again continues to be undefeated. We are nearly halfway through the season, and Nebraska has still not lost a game. We will cover those things when we return.
All right, we're back. Final segment on this Tuesday episode of the Locked On Nebraska podcast. Mitch Sherman, Connor Happer with you. As Connor mentioned before the break, Nebraska basketball is 15-0. First, on Monday, the Huskers achieve the ranking of number 10 in the Associated Press poll, which puts Nebraska in the rare air of being a top 10 team for the first time since 1966. And then, in the way that you would assume it should go for Nebraska basketball, because this is Nebraska basketball, the Huskers have a game at Ohio State, which is 10-3, lost to North Carolina by 1 point, close loss to Pitt, fairly close loss against Illinois. Like, it's a good team. Ohio State is potentially an NCAA tournament team. And Nebraska's going in there. Nebraska's an underdog. You don't expect Nebraska, even at 14-0, 2 days after this emotional win at home against Michigan State. Like, this is a tough task to ask of this team. And they handled it like, any other day. Here we go. Huskers don't play their best and find a way to pull it out in the end. Like, this was an even game going down the stretch in Columbus, and Nebraska comes out on top with some crazy playmaking by the freshman Braden Frager, and just good, solid, fundamental, composed team basketball. That's what they are. They're 15-0, Connor.
It's crazy. It's crazy how much of a difference that last part that you said makes, especially late in games. Because I felt like for the second consecutive game, and they had a couple bye games before that. And I guess this wasn't the case against Illinois, but I thought for the second consecutive game, coming down the stretch in a 1 or 2 possession game, even though the other team was sort of mounting a comeback, and even though they had a little bit of momentum, I just felt like Nebraska was the safer bet, considering their sort of stability and connectivity and their ability to win kind of possession by possession. They don't freak out. They're calm. No. They know where they want the ball to go. Braden Frager made winning plays in that game, and he's the perfect guy. He's crazy, by the way. He's the perfect guy for that team because
why do you say that? Why do you say that? Is it because of the things he does on the court, or what makes you look at his eyes?
I love the finger guns thing because
the 3-point guns. Yeah.
Here's why. Because he is we talk about this team in the sense of everybody else kind of understands their role and they're really, really good at it and they're stars in it. Mm-hmm. Everybody on the floor. Frager, I think, is the guy that you go tell him hey man, you just cook, whatever you want to do. We're going to put the ball in your hand and you can win these, sort of one-on-one. He's their one guy, I think, late in games. And you saw it last night where you could say, all right, ISO ball, Frager makes something happen. And man, he does. And he does his role really well on top of that. But he was really, really good last night.
And he's from Lincoln, which is amazing because for decades, Nebraska has just dropped the ball repeatedly in being able to land players from its own backyard. We've seen them go out of state. We've seen them go to Creighton. We've seen them go to Omaha and have more success than what has happened with local players in the Nebraska basketball program. And here is the X factor, the wild card, the totally unexpected piece who's winning games in the Big Ten against good teams for Nebraska on the road as a freshman. And he's a kid from Lincoln Southwest. It just adds another element to all of the craziness that is this Nebraska basketball season. And the concern that I have, as somebody who has lived through decades of Nebraska tripping over its own feet, is all right. Can the NCAA tournament start tomorrow? Because what's happening with this team? What is going to happen with this team over the next 2 months that makes them go completely off the tracks? And we're talking about them again, failing at the end. I'm beginning to think that's not going to happen. This team is built different.
Well, the crappy part about the NCAA tournament is that you could put yourself in as good of a position as possible, but it comes down to one game at the end of it, and then one game 6 times, right? So, I think their vulnerability is if, and they've been really good at this so far. Their vulnerability is if a team, just like it would be for anybody, if a team makes 10, 12, 14, 15 threes against them, they could be vulnerable to that. And, then you're just screwed at the end of the day. But the chances of that on a nightly basis, and if you play 30 games in a season, they're not going to happen very often because they're so tight. They're so airtight elsewhere defensively. They're up to 17th defensively on the adjusted efficiency metrics on
That's
KenPom.
such a big thing. That's such a big thing.
Yeah,
defense travels.
It'll carry. It will carry during the tournament, but the distressing part is, well, you never know when UL Monroe is going to make 17 threes in a game or something like that. So you always have to think about that possibility, sadly.
It is. This is the last thing we'll say about basketball before we finish the show with some football talk. It is incredibly comforting as an observer of Nebraska basketball. If you're on the bench for Nebraska basketball and it's coming down the stretch in a game, whether it's a home environment like we saw on January 2nd or last night on the road in a difficult place to play, and Nebraska goes to Indiana on Saturday, a more difficult place to play at Assembly Hall. And Bloomington might be like, the lid might come off of Bloomington on Friday night because Indiana football is playing in the college football playoff, might punch its ticket to the national championship game. And then you have people like, maybe it'll impact the basketball environment in a negative way because everyone's going to be out partying until 3 a.m. but whatever. Indiana will get up for basketball on Saturday against 15-0, 10th ranked Nebraska coming into town. What's incredibly encouraging and comforting is that you can be in that situation where the game is on the line. And if the ball is in the hands of Jamarcus Lawrence or Rink Mast or Price Sanford or Sam Hoiberg, any of those guys you feel good about. Like they have, I'd say those 4 on the offensive side. Like they'll sub in Burke, they'll sub in who am I missing? Somebody else to play defense. But you have 4 players where if the ball is in their hands at any point in a stressful moment, I feel good. Like I feel like those guys are going to make good plays and make smart decisions.
No doubt. Yep, that's it. And that's most of college basketball, to be honest with you. And most of college basketball doesn't, have that, especially at this point in the year. So I don't know when the streak is going to end. It's going to be a tough thing to go on the road and win in Indiana. It's like I thought it was going to be tough to win at Ohio State.
I'll pick them to lose that game. I pick them to lose every game. I think they're going to lose every night.
How high will they go? It's awesome. What is going on right now? They're back at home against Oregon on the 13th. So there you go.
And that'll be crazy no matter what happens at Assembly Hall. Like if they're 15-1 coming back home, hey, PBA is going to be on fire. School's back in session. If they're 16-0, look out. Like Dana Altman coming into PBA to play like number 6 Nebraska at 16-0. I don't know. Nebraska's won at Assembly Hall before. This is a talented Indiana team, like it always is, and Nebraska will probably be an underdog on Saturday yet again. Like, why not? Just keep it rolling. They got their finger on the hot button, so let's just keep the thing going.
Yeah. There's a couple coaches there that you're going up against in the next 2 games with sort of ties to Nebraska. Darian DeVries. At Indiana. So yeah, that'll be fascinating over the next 2. Okay, Owen Chambliss joins Nebraska as we get you out of here. He'll be a 4th-year junior next year. Started his career at Utah, 2 years at San Diego State. 4 sacks, 9.5 tackles for loss last year. Forced a fumble, 110 tackles, 6th in the Mountain West, first team All Mountain West. 2 years of eligibility.
Big deal because there are these San Diego State defensive players who went into the portal, and part of the now in college football, look at what Matt Campbell's staff is doing at Penn State and bringing the entire Iowa State team. By the way, was Iowa State good enough to win in the Big Ten in 2025? They did beat the Cyclones did beat Iowa, but whoa, I mean, like Penn State is now Iowa State has transferred to Penn State. I saw that on social media this week. But part of the benefit of hiring a coach or coaches who had success at another college is that they generally bring along some of their players. And this addition of Owen Chambliss for Nebraska is big in that sense because some others from San Diego State, Ryan Henderson and Trey White, have opted not to follow Rob Orich and Roy Manning from San Diego to Lincoln. Like White, who was a strong pass rusher for the Aztecs, is headed to, I believe, Texas Tech. And Henderson canceled a visit to Nebraska over the weekend, so he won't be coming to the Huskers. But seemingly, you never know with the portal. You might just show up on Tuesday and sign a contract. Like maybe the offer for him will go up. But Chambliss is in. He is going to be at Nebraska as a key piece in the middle of that defense, like an inside linebacker for the Huskers in 2026, and that's a nice spot to add somebody.
Yeah. So. What's the total now? It's just Chambliss and Black, and
that's it. That's it. Because you may have heard there's no Kenny Minchey, so there will be more, I'm sure, on Tuesday into Wednesday. Nebraska will add to this class. Nebraska will probably lose some more players in the portal. You know, one thing that's probably going on behind the scenes and why you haven't seen maybe as many entries for Nebraska as you'd expect into the portal is there's negotiations that are happening. Like some of this stuff goes on without anybody knowing, at least in the public. And there are probably returning players with Nebraska like that it's trying to retain whose agents have provided deadlines to Pat Stewart and the Nebraska personnel staff and say, all right, by noon on Wednesday or 2 p.m. on Thursday, like we need to have this number or he's going in the portal. And if it happens, it happens.
Yep. All right. So that's we'll see what comes of today in the as the transfer portal turns. We'll keep you updated as we go. Appreciate you listening and being with us every single day. If you're watching with us on video, we're going to send you over to the first ever national 24/7 Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. And on audio, make your second listen, Locked On College Football. We'll talk to you tomorrow.